Hello and welcome everybody to A Call with Dr. Cook. I'm George Wright and I'm here with Dr. Vaughn Cook. Today is November 3rd. And Dr. Cook, welcome. We're glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too, George. Good to see you. Good to see
This
you.
is
It
a
looks
big
like
one.
you're in a new place.
You know, I am. I'm actually traveling a little bit, doing some work here, learning a lot, and it's great. But you know what? With technology today, it doesn't even matter anymore. It seems like we're able to do all kinds of things. So
You gotta love technology.
here we are on the road. So, Dr. Cook, there's been a lot that's happened since we've talked last. In fact, seems like we're a little bit late this month too. We postponed our call for a few days because of some of the exciting things that are going on. Tell us about it.
Well, we've got CERT launched as of today. And part of that launch, we added, as you can see on this screen, 97 new boost ingredients.
97. Okay, and there's got to be some, you know, that's a lot, Dr. Cook, a lot more than we've been doing lately.
Well, most of these are actually essential oils. I would assume that most of our affiliates and customers are familiar that essential oils have a rather profound effect on emotion, or can have. So we've got a lot of those. We've also added chakras. We've added some more acupuncture points and a few other goodies, but 97 total.
Wow. Wow, that is, you know what the library just gets better and better, and I know that these are probably having something specifically to do with CERT, but again, the library, the limbic arc tool just gets better every month, and it gets more powerful as we go. So I'm excited to see some of these things, Dr. Cook. I know that we tried to give some of our leaders some early access to this program so that they could kind of get a little bit of sneak peek at it. But here we are going to be releasing it to everybody. And to a large extent, you know, CERT stands for Cook's Emotional Release Technique. And so this is a fun time for all of us to see how you think about emotions and you know how you approach that topic, which is incredibly powerful. So I'll you know I'm excited to hear, Dr. Cook. I'm excited for today's topic.
Oh, George, you're just too excitable.
With all of the emotions going on, you know, there's I'm on pins and needles right now. So
okay, well, let me share a screen here.
Okay.
And let's get into. Now, the slides I'm using here, George, are the same slides that are used on the
promotional video.
on the little video that you can see.
Okay,
but we'll spend a little bit more time with it, so we don't have quite time constraint.
Okay.
But it was basically, and this is basically a review of what we've talked about over the last couple of months as we've talked about emotions.
Yeah.
One of the things we know is that voice requires the entire body, or it engages the entire body. And what that means is there is a ton of information that's carried in the voice, more than just what the words are. We also know that voice energy is topic specific. When you talk about a particular topic, the energy in your voice changes and carries the information of the experience that you associate with that topic, any memories. So you'll have a different voice energy when you talk about anything.
And it's not the words, it's just the literal energy in your voice.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, it's subtle enough that sometimes you don't pick it up consciously, but subconsciously it's there. And frankly, I think all of us have had the experience where we've said, that just doesn't sound right. You know, you're hearing somebody talk something, you're saying, there's just something wrong about what this person's saying. And it's usually what you're picking up as a dissonance or a disconnect between what their words are and what the information the voice is carrying. So if somebody's lying to you, you actually can pick it up. In fact, one of the things I've learned from using this kind of technology over the years clinically is it's impossible to lie. because your voice energy always speaks the truth, even though your words may be deceptive. So, you know, there's no reason to lie because you can't do it. You're just deceiving
is so
yourself.
Powerful. That's exciting.
Anyway, let's see the next slide here. This talks about perception, and what we have developed over the years is an ability to decode voice energy and then display it in a way that has meaning. It's called a perception index because what we reveal through the voice energy is our perception. And each one of the areas in the perception index is called a zone. So you've got zone 9 and zone 10, and so there's 12 of them. And actually, each of those zones correspond to a key on a 12-note scale. Each of those zones also has a corresponding perception. And for example, in zone 1, if you've got a strong imbalance in zone 1, it means that you've got the perception of unacknowledgement. And it's important to know that there is no moral value in this voice perception or this perception index. In other words, if you feel unacknowledged or sad or self-critical or angry, it doesn't mean if your voice energy shows a perception in one of those zones, it doesn't mean you're a good or a bad person. It just means that when you talk about that topic, this is the perception that's carrying through as the strongest perception.
Okay.
The challenge, and we've talked about this in our earlier calls, the problem isn't having excess energy in any one of these zones. The problem is having excess energy in one of these zones on a perpetual basis.
So
in other words, stuck energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And stuck energy is bad energy just by definition. It doesn't matter if it's good or, it doesn't mean if the emotion is positive or negative. If it's stuck, that's a dysfunction.
I think a lot of people in limbic arc are familiar with what some have called the flower, which is really a display of this perception index, right?
Well, and that's going to be about one slide down the road or two.
Okay, but again, going
3.
back to the perception index, it's not like we're trying to move it into a certain zone. Every zone is okay.
Yeah. It's just this. We gather this information just for information purposes to know what we're dealing with. Okay. The interesting thing about perception is most of it exists at a subconscious level, just like an iceberg. Most of the action is below the surface, and we are born into energy patterns, and those energy patterns persist for the most part through our entire lives. Part of what comes with those energy patterns is a default disposition or a default perception. And if you were a grumpy little boy, you're probably going to grow up and be a grumpy old man. If you're a happy kid, you're probably going to be a happy person your whole life, because these perceptions don't change much. Now, the challenge with that, the good part about that, I should say, is that you don't want to have to relearn everything your ancestors learned. And so this perpetuation of these energy patterns is a blessing to us. But to the extent that our ancestors had dysfunction, and they all did, and we all do, to the extent that they had dysfunction, if that dysfunction then carries forward into future generations, that's not a desirable thing. So, but most of it happens below the level of consciousness.
Okay.
As we get older now, here's the challenge. As we get older, we get smarter. But if our perception is controlled subconsciously, and if it's the bottom of the iceberg, for the top of the iceberg, our thinking mind, it's very difficult to get any action below the level of the surface, because the smartest part of us, as we all know with limbic arc, the smartest part of us is our subconscious self, and the dumbest part of us is our conscious self. And that's not to say that we're dumb consciously. We're really smart, but we're super smart at a subconscious level. And that means we're we're just difficult to manage at a subconscious level. These are emotions that are a little bit more specific. If we take this perception concept and then we distill it into different emotions, there's a lot of overlap between the zones. You may feel resentment, as an example. That's one of the emotions showing here on this chart. Resentment may apply to half of these different zones.
Okay.
And if you've got a stuck zone, you may carry those stuck emotions with it. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want emotions to be static. You want to feel resentment sometimes, and you want to feel ungrounded sometimes, and you want to feel greedy sometimes, and you want to feel happy sometimes, but you don't want to feel any of those all the time.
All the time.
And we know from our earlier discussions and for a lot of discussions with limbic arc, there are lots of ways to affect any part of us. And the perception part of us is part of the equation of this triad of health. And you can change emotion with energy or function, and you can change the other two. It just goes back and forth. So that's a point of review. Now, what we've done with what's referred to as the flower sometimes,
okay,
it's actually a takeoff from this technology that I was describing. And what we have done with CERT is we have just expanded that capability inside limbic arc. And so when you talk of a subject, we're now taking your voice energy and we're plotting it onto a perception index. With CERT, what we do is we focus on the three most significant zones with respect to the voice energy. Now, what this perception index shows us is zone 10, which is red, has an extreme imbalance. Zone 9 and 11, which have yellow, that's a high imbalance. The green means low or medium, and the blue means low, and the white area is just insignificant. So we take, and this is fairly typical of a perception index, I should say. So we take the three most significant and we classify those as priority zones. And then what we look for are things that we can use to break the inertia in these zones and release the perception and release any associated emotion. Again, the idea isn't to make you feel differently, it's to make you more fluid and to move you from a position of default to a position of choice.
Okay.
I don't want to always default in anger, but if anger is my dominant perception, that may be just where I go by default. And as I get older, I think, why do I get mad all the time? And the reason is because that's where your subconscious perception default takes you. So what we want to do is then release that perception and release the associated emotions. So instead of just moving there by default, you can actually choose when to be angry. And as intelligent beings, we tend to know how to do that. I mean, I'm not going to get angry if it's not appropriate.
Right.
Now, what we do with limbic arc is we're taking information. So all of these new boost ingredients, we put them in because we needed to expand that part of the library for the CERT program.
That makes perfect sense. And so all of these ingredients now have an ability to interact with our emotions in a powerful way.
That's right. And so you run the scan, and I'll show you this in just a minute. You select the ones you want, you activate the info boost, and it has a focused effect on the three priority zones. And the goal here, I should say, before I say the goal, then what happens is we run this for 24 hours. So a CERT info boost only runs for 24 hours. The reason we run it for 24 hours is because we have an internal biological clock that cycles chi or body energy through all of the meridians over a 24-hour period. And it's kind of like this tidal wave of energy that moves through our body energy system. And we want the info boost to be active for one complete circadian cycle. And so it runs for 24 hours. Now, people might say, well, wait a minute, wouldn't it make better to run this for, maybe 4 or 5 days? And the answer is you don't need to, because in a 24-hour period, your body picks up the information and processes it, and you'll get the release that you're interested in. It'll actually make the shift. And you may feel it even faster. I've been playing with this, and I've noticed a difference on some of these info boosts as quickly as 30 minutes.
Wow.
So, but you still want to run it the 24 hours because you want to get it through that whole circadian cycle.
Through the cycle, right.
Right. And the goal then is to, release the stuck emotions and turn them into fluid emotions. Now, George, let me share another screen. I believe that's my last slide. It is. I want to move to this guy.
Okay, now this is it. This is the program, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So I'm showing really a snippet, but I'm showing you the biggest snippet.
Okay.
There are other things that you'll see when you actually download it. And the way we've deployed this, George, as you know, but I'll mention it to everybody else, is you get to try this for free for once. You can go in and try it and see how you like it before you actually subscribe to it. And so you'll run a Spark scan, and what I'm going to do here is add a CERT info boost. So I've got to go over to my screen, so I'm working it right. There we go.
Okay.
I can't click on my window. I have to click on the actual program. Okay, so you'll recognize this. We're running the Spark.
Some information on
a little
the Spark
information
scan
about it. And we're going to start the recording. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see. I'm trying to think of a topic, and I should have thought of one sooner. I like riding a bike, as you know, George. I have a couple of bikes that I ride on a regular basis. And so I'm going to do a CERT to be a better bike rider.
Okay.
Now, you might mention, wait a minute, what does motion have to do with riding your bike? Well, I get out on the bike. I have a mountain bike, and I get out and I'm on steep terrain, or I'm on a narrow path, or, and it might be I get afraid, or, so there's lots of emotion that go into the process. And
well,
so
it's clearly
anyway,
something you
let's
love
start.
and something you enjoy.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, and if I've got stuck emotions about bike riding. So I'm talking about bike riding. I'm really interested in something that will help me be a better bike rider, and I don't want to have any emotional blockages. Okay, there we go. And let's continue.
Now, just to be clear, you could use that topic for a lot of things. If you're working through a relationship with someone, or if you've got, strictly emotional things that you're dealing with, certainly you can talk to that emotion directly.
Right. And most people, that's how you would use it. But I used that bike because I wanted you to know that emotions attached to everything.
Right.
And, if you've got a low back pain, as an example, you'll have an emotional attachment to the back pain, or there will be an emotional attachment to the back pain. And it's possible, and I've seen this clinically, that it doesn't matter what kind of physical intervention you do with someone, their emotional sabotage, their emotional linkage to that problem sabotages all the therapy, and they just never get better. Okay, here we are. So we've got the info boost up, and you can see, it's not the info boost, but we're to the next step. You can see here are the priority zones. So I've got 9, 10, 11 that are showing up. And here's the, suppressed emotional expression, unworthy, rigid beliefs versus open. if I click on this down arrow, let me scroll up just a little bit.
So showing
These
all of the,
are,
yeah.
yeah, these are all the boost ingredients that are related to zone 9. And this first number, which is 82% in the box, that's the OR, the outcome ratio that is specific to zone 9 for turmeric.
Sure.
86, that number happens to be the overall OR for turmeric. Okay, so it's kind of the global response, but as it relates specifically to zone 9, it's the 82%. If I click on this to include it, oh, wait a minute, I just clicked on all. Now,
yeah, that's the all button.
Yeah, you don't want to hit that all button unless you want everything, but I wouldn't advise it. So I'm going to take the first one, and when I click on it and put it into the circuit, as it were, you can see the effect that it has. Instead of my baseline over here, it started to move that towards the right. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to get it as far as I can over here to the right.
So, Dr. Cook, if you scroll up on the page, I can see also it's changed the graphic up on the top as well, the flower. That was black and white, and now there's a little sliver of green that's been added.
Well, let me, there you go. So if I uncheck it, if I check it, you can see that this product, this item, I should say, the turmeric, it's related to 2 zones, and that's why these 2 zones changed colors.
Okay.
So there's a lot of overlap in these ingredients, by the way. You know, they're not just, turmeric's not just good for zone 9, it's good for other zones. And because my priority zones are those 3, that's why it showed up there, because it's in both of those. So I click again. Now, if you look over, and what I found is I like to take down to about 75% the number.
And right now you're clicking on the ones in the box, 75% of the ones that are specific to that zone. Is that right?
That's right. That's really the ones I pay attention to. I don't pay too much attention, other than if you look at chakra number 10, and I should say this is a 12 chakra system that we've got loaded in. It's not the 7 standard chakras. We've expanded that to include the other 5. So chakra 10 is 97% overall and 77% for this zone. So that may be a little more powerful than some of these others even. Okay, so we've got that done for that one, and you can see here's the impact that those items have had in zone 10 and zone 11. Let's go to zone 10, and while I'm here, let me show you. I've selected 6 items in zone 9. Of those 6, 3 of those are common with zone 10, and 4 of those are common with zone 11. So they show up in all 3 categories. Now I'll take zone 10. Let's open that guy up, and let me take these that have got, that takes me down to 75. I may have to go a little deeper, but let's stay with that just for the demonstration here. And now somebody might think, well, do I have to select enough things to actually move these over to the very end? And the answer is no, you don't. If you want to be more conservative in your approach, then I would select fewer things. You might say, no, I'm only going to take what appears in the 90%. So what we're showing you is the progress bar to give you an idea of what to expect, but you may not want to expect, you may not want to experience that much horsepower. And so you just take it a little bit slower. Okay, let's look at this one. Okay, I'm down to 67% here. And I'm going to just take that just to show you that you really, you don't have to get everything over to the right. And what happens then is I just come up and activate my info boost. And there it is. It's now been activated, and it will run for 24 hours. So it ends in 24 hours. And if I want to see what's in it, I can click on the little I button, the information button, and that shows me the items that are included. These zones show me what zones are the priority zones, but they're actually not included in the info boost. It's the boost ingredients that are included in the info boost.
And some of those ingredients apply to multiple zones. And so, Dr. Cook, tell me, you focus on the 3 zones. Is that just to keep from being overloaded with information and data?
Yeah. Well, what we've learned from doing this with our other technology for a lot of years is people usually have no more than 3 priority zones. Sometimes it's 1. Sometimes it is more, but you just don't need to. You don't need to take a sledgehammer when you're putting in finishing nails.
Well, and to your comment earlier, the objective isn't to solve the issue. The objective here is to have movement, to be able to shift and to be able to move between emotions easily.
That's correct. Okay, I'm going to unshare my screen, George.
Okay.
There are other things, like I say, I'm just showing you a snippet of this, but that I think answers a lot of the questions that people will have, which is, what does this mean? What do I do with it? And
wow.
The rest of it is the menu, and you can look around that.
I'm really excited for everybody to try this new tool. Putting it out there is amazing. I think that emotions are such a big part of our lives, and I'm sure that people are going to find new and unique ways to use this technology. But what a powerful insight, Dr. Cook. If you've got just a second, I know that we're close on time, but if you've got a couple minutes, Dr. Cook, there are a couple questions.
Let's do it.
So
I do, George.
First question is the new CERT program ever not recommended? And in terms of explanation, I've had a loved one who's had some wellness challenges that are likely rooted in emotional cause. And from what I've seen, the emotions boil over and sometimes even just make things worse. So if we clear an emotion using this technology, how is it that can it be safely done without being overwhelmed? And there's just a lot of questions on that, Dr. Cook.
What we're dealing with is really perception. And we call it emotional release because that's a byproduct of reframing a perception. And I'll give you an example, and I think it's one that I've used in some of our past calls. But let's say that a friend says something to you that's hurtful, and you go, I'm only smiling because if you're married, this happens when sometimes you say things or your spouse says things, and it's really like, holy smokes, am I in trouble? But so we don't perceive what's actually, our perception is not the same as the other person's perception. And so you might feel hurt, and then a couple of days after feeling hurt, you go and say, hey, you said this thing to me a couple of days ago, and it really made me, feel bad. And then they say, oh my gosh, really? And they're not even aware of it. And then they explain the circumstance, and all of a sudden your emotion completely changes. It's because your perception of the situation changes. That's what happens with this CERT info boost, is you're going to shift a perception, and the emotions that go with it will then become fluid. And that process is usually, it's usually pleasant and so natural that people quite often don't even realize that it's happening. Now, to answer this question a little more directly, if you are concerned about overdoing it, you again, don't load up so many items in the info boost. You might say to your friend who has this hypersensitivity and emotional release tends to make them more stressed, instead of going down to 75% like I did in this demonstration, you might say, hey, let's only go to 95%, or let's only go to 90%. And you just take the top few and turn that one on. And then in a day, after 24 hours, you come back in and try it again.
Okay.
So,
well, the intent here, this is all a wellness tool, and the intent is this will improve wellness. I know that emotions are part of that. I think it's going to have a profound effect, and I know that I can't wait to play with it and try it in my own realm. But I think that I don't think that there's danger in using this, Dr. Cook. It's
no, I don't think there's no contraindication here. It's never not recommended. In fact, I would think it's always recommended, honestly, because if you're dealing with any issue, there is always an emotional component to that issue.
Okay. Okay. I know we're out of time, but I'm going to continue to be a little bit selfish, Dr. Cook, and I've got another question that I want to go through very quickly if I can. This one's an easy one. I can't wait for the answer here. I love watching your webinars, and I know you send out a replay link afterwards, but where can I see all of your videos?
I think there's a link on our website, isn't there, George, where you can go and see that?
Yeah, you can find it. I think it's the top of there's a call with Dr. Cook on the top of the webpage, but really, I think the mother lode here is the YouTube channel. If you go to the Limbic Arc YouTube channel, you're not just going to find the calls with Dr. Cook, but you're going to find all of the videos that are there, and it's a wonderful, wonderful library of resources, and I would encourage you to go there. I'd encourage you to like it and to subscribe and do all of the things so that you can make sure that you're up to date and can see all of those things all along. So.